Good evening, Senior Fit Nation family. Dr. Miller here. I want to start with a simple yet powerful truth, something we all need to understand. After the age of 40, we begin to lose muscle mass. Now, that's not just me speculating. That's solid, undeniable data. And here's the real kicker. By the time many of us reach our 70s or 80s, if we don't actively step in and do something about it, we could lose up to half of our skeletal muscle. This silent process is called sarcopenia, and it's one of the greatest, yet often overlooked threats to our quality of life as we get older. Here's why it's so critical. Sarcopenia doesn't directly kill you, but it sets off a dangerous domino effect. It often ends in frailty, falls, unexpected hospital stays, a heartbreaking loss of independence, and eventually, a much shorter, less fulfilling life. So, what can we do about it? Today, I'm going to share some crucial insights, things most people don't realize until it's far too late. Please, stay with me until the very end, because understanding this could fundamentally change your aging journey. And tell me, where are you tuning in from tonight? Have you noticed little changes in your strength or balance lately? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's really dig into this. After the age of 30, sometimes even earlier, we quietly start to lose our skeletal muscle. This isn't just a coincidence, and it's certainly not something that only happens to people who are sedentary or unhealthy. It's a universal biological process, happening to all of us, known as sarcopenia or age-related muscle loss. It's gradual. It's silent. And for most people, it goes completely unnoticed until it starts to affect those everyday tasks we take for granted. Here's what the science, the data, tells us. Our muscle mass begins to decline at a rate of roughly 1% per year, starting right around our 30s or 40s. And muscle strength, which is arguably even more important, declines at about 2 to 3% per year. This means that by the time many people are in their 70s or 80s, they may have lost as much as 40 to 50% of their peak muscle mass, and even more of their strength. Now, why does this really matter? After all, can't we just slow down a bit as we age? My answer is a firm no. Not if your goal is a long life with quality. And that, my friends, is the key distinction. I often say that the goal isn't just to live longer, it's to live better longer. And your muscle is an absolute central player in that strategy. Sarcopenia doesn't kill you outright, and that's part of the problem. It's not like a sudden heart attack or a cancer diagnosis, where the event is acute and immediate. Instead, sarcopenia sets off a chain reaction, a kind of slow-motion failure of your body's system. It starts with small, almost imperceptible changes. You might notice you don't stand up from a comfy chair quite as easily, or you start avoiding carrying all your groceries upstairs in one trip. Then your balance might begin to feel a bit off. Your steps become more cautious. You stop walking as far. You might even start needing a little help getting out of a car, or bracing yourself to rise from the floor. Eventually, the muscle loss becomes so severe that your mobility is significantly compromised, and with that, sadly, your independence. And this is where the real, profound consequences begin. Reduced mobility leads to less physical activity, which tragically speeds up even further muscle loss. It's a vicious, downward cycle. Your risk of falls increases sharply. And as we know from multiple long-term studies, a fall after the age of 70 can be truly catastrophic. Roughly 20 to 30% of older adults who fracture a hip will, heartbreakingly, die within 12 months. Many, many more will never regain their full independence. But muscle loss is about so much more than just strength and balance. Metabolically speaking, muscle is actually one of the most important organs in your body. Yes, you heard me right, an organ. We tend to think of muscle as just the tissue that helps us move, but that's an outdated view. Skeletal muscle is actually the largest site where your body disposes of glucose, or blood sugar. It acts like a sink for blood sugar, helping to regulate insulin sensitivity and overall metabolic health. So, when your muscle mass declines, insulin resistance tends to rise. This helps explain why sarcopenia isn't just linked to frailty, but also to serious metabolic diseases like type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and even some cancers. Muscle also plays a critical role in your immune function, hormone balance, and your ability to recover from illness or injury. It serves as a vital reservoir of amino acids, which your body can draw upon in times of stress or trauma. Think of it this way. When you get sick, let's say you're hospitalized with pneumonia, your body's demand for protein increases dramatically. If you don't have enough muscle to meet that demand, your system effectively starts eating itself. The result is a steep, sometimes irreversible decline. Many older adults who never quite bounce back from a hospitalization or surgery are, in part, suffering from a serious catabolic crisis due to low muscle reserves. Now, here's the truly good news. And it is genuinely good news. Sarcopenia is not inevitable. Or, more accurately, the process of muscle loss is natural, but the outcome is absolutely modifiable. This is what I emphasize with all my patients. You cannot stop aging. No one can. But you can profoundly change how you age. And maintaining, or even building muscle mass as you get older, is entirely possible with the right smart interventions. But here's a crucial point. The window to intervene effectively often starts closing earlier than most people think. Waiting until you're 70 to start thinking about strength training or optimizing your protein is like trying to start investing for retirement at 65. It's possible to start, but you've missed decades of compounding interest. Ideally, you should begin your muscle preservation strategy in your 30s or 40s. But even if you're older, much older, you can still make incredibly meaningful gains. The human body is remarkably adaptive when given the right signals. So, what are those signals? There are two main ones: mechanical load and amino acids. Mechanical load means resistance training. That's lifting weights, or using resistance bands, or even just your own body weight with proper form and gradually increasing the challenge. Amino acids mean protein, particularly high-quality leucine-rich protein that can stimulate muscle protein synthesis. That's the process of building and repairing muscle. We'll talk more about the vital role of nighttime protein later, but for now, it's essential to understand that preserving muscle is an active process. You must give your muscles a reason to stay. If you don't, your body will deem them unnecessary, and they will, quite simply, disappear. This is a powerful concept called use it or lose it physiology, and it applies especially strongly as we age. Just think about this. In a study where healthy older adults were put on 10 days of bed rest, they lost nearly 1.5 pounds of lean mass and 15% of their leg strength in just 10 days. Imagine that kind of loss playing out slowly over 10 years. Now, imagine doing nothing to stop it. So the big takeaway is this. Muscle loss with age is not just about how you look. It is a critical medical issue, a profound longevity issue, and it starts earlier and progresses faster than most people realize. But here's the empowering truth. It is also highly modifiable. If you begin now, today, you can build and preserve enough muscle to not only extend your life, but dramatically improve the quality of that life. Because in the end, the question isn't whether you'll live to be 90. The truly important question is whether, when you're 90, you'll still be walking under your own power, living independently, and doing the things that truly make life worth living. And that, my friends, begins with muscle. There's a widely held belief, especially common among older adults, that as long as you're staying active, going for walks, maybe hitting the gym a few times a week, You're doing everything necessary to preserve your muscle mass. But this belief is not only incomplete, it's dangerously misleading. Because the truth is this: exercise alone is not enough to maintain muscle as we age. Let me explain why. When we think about preserving lean muscle, the first thing that comes to mind is usually strength training. And that's a good instinct. Mechanical tension, the load placed on your muscle fibers during resistance exercise, is the primary trigger for muscle protein synthesis. Or MPS, that's your body building new muscle. Without that signal, your body has no reason to maintain muscle. It's energetically expensive tissue. So yes, resistance training is absolutely necessary. But the signal alone isn't sufficient for your body to actually build or even preserve muscle in response to that mechanical load. It needs raw materials, and that means protein, specifically essential amino acids, particularly leucine, which acts as the on switch for MPS. This is where nutrition truly enters the picture. Most people, especially older adults, are chronically underconsuming high-quality protein. And more importantly, they're not consuming it in the right way. The typical pattern looks something like this: a light breakfast, maybe just toast or oatmeal, a moderate lunch, and then most of their protein comes in at dinner. That distribution is far from ideal for stimulating muscle building throughout the day. Worse, many older adults don't hit the leucine threshold, that minimum amount of leucine needed to kickstart muscle building, at any meal, especially not in the evening when muscle breakdown accelerates. Let's talk about something called anabolic resistance. This is one of the central challenges of aging. As we get older, our muscles become less responsive to the same building stimuli, both exercise and protein. So while a 25-year-old might stimulate MPS with 20 grams of whey protein, a 70-year-old might need 35 or even 40 grams of a leucine-rich protein to achieve the same effect. The implication here is profound. Not only do older adults need more protein, they also need it distributed smartly, with a sufficient dose at every meal to cross that threshold for synthesis. In fact, one of the biggest misconceptions is that total daily protein is all that matters. In reality, what matters more, especially for muscle preservation, is how you dose and distribute that protein throughout the day, and how you align it with your exercise window. A randomized trial from 2015 clearly showed that evenly distributing protein, about 30 grams per meal across breakfast, lunch, and dinner, led to significantly higher 24-hour MPS compared to a skewed distribution, even with the exact same total protein intake. Here's another critical layer. Timing protein intake around your training window enhances the muscle building response. In younger people, there's a relatively wide anabolic window after exercise. In older individuals, that window becomes narrower and more sensitive to nutritional support. This is why I recommend that my patients consume a robust, leucine-rich protein dose within 1 to 2 hours after their workout, and another before bed, which we'll discuss more shortly. But there's a deeper problem here, one that requires us to zoom out. Many people, especially as they age, start to prioritize calorie reduction or adopt diets that are low in protein by default, like certain plant-based diets that are poorly constructed. Now, I want to be clear. A plant-based diet can support muscle preservation, but it requires meticulous planning and usually higher total protein intake to make up for lower bioavailability and leucine content. Most people just don't do that, so what's the cost? They lose muscle slowly and silently, and over time, they begin to experience the classic symptoms of undernourishment for their muscles: slower recovery from workouts, more frequent injuries, declining strength, and impaired blood sugar control. These aren't normal parts of aging, my friends. These are clear signs of inadequate nutritional support for your precious, lean muscle mass. Let's look at this from another angle. If I told you that you were slowly losing bone density or red blood cells or liver function, would you shrug and say, well, that's aging? Probably not. You'd immediately ask what could be done. Yet with muscle, we tolerate an extraordinary level of loss, even when we have the tools to stop it. The prescription, again, is not complicated, but it requires consistency and intention. Engage in regular progressive resistance training at least 2 to 3 times per week. Consume 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, depending on your activity level and body composition. Distribute that protein across 3 to 4 meals, with a minimum of 30 grams per meal, and at least 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine per dose. And time protein consumption around your training sessions, particularly within 1 to 2 hours post-workout, and again before bed. It's also important to emphasize protein quality. Not all proteins are created equal. Animal-based proteins, dairy, eggs, meat, tend to have higher biological value and more favorable amino acid profiles, meaning your body uses them more efficiently. That doesn't mean plant-based proteins are ineffective, but it does mean you often need more total volume and thoughtful combinations to achieve the same muscle-building effect. This is where supplements can play a very useful role, not as a crutch, but as a smart tool. A high-quality whey isolate after your workout, and a slow digesting casein protein before bed can make the difference between a catabolic overnight state, where your body is breaking down muscle, and one that actively supports muscle repair. In summary, nutrition, and specifically protein intake, is not just a side note to muscle preservation. It's absolutely central. Exercise creates the signal. Protein provides the building blocks. Without both, the system fails. It's like trying to build a house with perfect blueprints but no bricks. You can have the plan, but nothing's going to hold up. Muscle preservation is a race against time, but it's a race you can absolutely win if you combine the right form of exercise with the right form of nutrition. One without the other is a coin toss. Both together, that's strategy, that's powerful medicine, that's longevity. Now, let's talk about a specific window of time each day when your body's physiology actually becomes more likely to break down tissue than build it. And here's the surprising part. It happens when most people assume everything is fine, during sleep. Let me be absolutely clear. Sleep is not the problem. In fact, sleep is arguably the most important health behavior we engage in daily. It supports countless regenerative processes, from memory consolidation to immune repair. But while sleep is vital, it also introduces a prolonged period of fasting. And that fasting has very real implications for muscle metabolism, particularly in older adults. Let's look at the science. During the day, especially after meals and exercise, your body cycles through periods of anabolism. That's tissue building, where muscle protein synthesis, MPS, exceeds muscle protein breakdown, MPB. This is the ideal state. It's how we maintain or build muscle. But during overnight fasting, typically 7 to 9 hours without food, the balance shifts. Muscle protein breakdown starts to exceed synthesis, and the net result is a gradual loss of lean tissue. In younger individuals, the body compensates fairly well. They have enough hormonal drive, like testosterone, IGF-1, growth hormone, and sufficient muscle mass to handle these short periods of muscle breakdown. But in older adults, especially those who already have reduced muscle reserves and lower levels of these anabolic hormones, this nightly breakdown becomes a significant contributor to chronic muscle loss over time. And here's where things get even more concerning. Not only are older adults more vulnerable to overnight muscle breakdown, they're also less likely to fully recover from it. Why? Because of anabolic resistance, which we discussed earlier. The reduced ability of aging muscle to respond to protein and exercise. That means whatever muscle is lost overnight isn't easily restored unless there's a strong, intentional muscle-building signal the following day, one that most people fail to provide. So every night, the body goes into a low-grade muscle-losing state, and without sufficient protein before bed, or a powerful signal to kickstart muscle building shortly after waking, your muscle levels continue to decline, slowly but surely. Let's put some numbers around this. Studies using advanced techniques have clearly shown that overnight fasting results in a net negative protein balance for your skeletal muscle. Muscle protein breakdown increases, while synthesis rates drop because there are no amino acids circulating. In one study, older adults who consumed no protein before bed showed significantly more overnight muscle degradation compared to those who received a dose of casein protein. This tells us something incredibly important. Muscle breakdown during sleep is not inevitable. It's conditional on whether your muscles have the nutrients they need. Now, you might be wondering, can I just eat more during the day and carry those nutrients through the night? Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work that way. Amino acids, the building blocks of protein, are not stored in your body the way glucose or fat are. They circulate briefly, and then they're either used, burned for energy, or excreted. That means you can't eat a high-protein lunch and expect it to protect your muscle overnight. By bedtime, your amino acid levels are long gone. Your body is running on empty unless you do something about it. This brings us to protein timing, and specifically, pre-sleep protein feeding, a strategy that's gaining significant traction in the medical and exercise science communities. A number of studies have clearly demonstrated that consuming 30 to 40 grams of slow-digesting protein, usually casein, about 30 to 60 minutes before bed, can significantly enhance overnight muscle protein synthesis, especially in older adults. Why casein? Casein is one of two primary proteins found in milk, the other being whey. While both are complete proteins, they differ significantly in how they behave once ingested. Whey protein is rapidly digested, hitting peak amino acid levels within about an hour. That makes it ideal right after a workout when you want a fast, sharp boost to muscle building, but its effects are short-lived. By 2 or 3 hours, those amino acid levels are back to baseline. It's a sprint. Casein, on the other hand, is a marathon. When consumed, casein forms a gel-like structure in your stomach, slowing down digestion and resulting in a slow, steady release of amino acids into your bloodstream. Plasma amino acid levels remain elevated for up to 7 hours, providing a sustained anabolic environment that directly counteracts that typical overnight muscle breakdown. This is precisely what makes casein the gold standard for pre-sleep protein. It mimics what your body needs during sleep: a slow, steady drip of amino acids to minimize muscle breakdown and support low-level muscle building throughout the night. This isn't just theory. It's been tested repeatedly in the lab. In a 2012 study, older men who consumed 40 grams of casein before bed showed a significant increase in overnight muscle protein synthesis compared to a group who didn't. More importantly, the amino acids were indeed being digested and absorbed during sleep, proving that late-night protein isn't wasted. Follow-up studies confirmed that pre-sleep, casein not only improves overnight muscle preservation, but can even enhance muscle mass and strength gains over time when combined with resistance training. That means it's not just protective. It's actively muscle building in the right context. Let me pause here and emphasize something truly important. If your goal is longevity with function, not just more years, but more capable, independent years, then muscle preservation is absolutely non-negotiable. The biggest threat to late-life independence is losing your mobility, and that begins with losing strength, which begins with losing muscle. You simply cannot afford to ignore even small, repeated muscle losses, especially overnight, when your body is most vulnerable. So, the obvious question becomes, how much casein should you consume? The research points to a minimum effective dose of about 30 grams, with 40 grams being optimal for most older adults. This provides enough leucine to stimulate muscle building and ensures that amino acids remain available through the night. You can get this from a casein protein supplement. Micellar casein is the ideal form. Or from whole food sources like cottage cheese or Greek yogurt. However, reaching 30 to 40 grams from food alone can be impractical for many people, especially if they're managing total calories or don't have a huge appetite late at night. That's where a high-quality micellar casein protein supplement becomes a powerful tool, a strategic intervention. Now, what about potential downsides? Some people worry that eating protein before bed will mess with their sleep, cause an upset stomach, or lead to fat gain. The science simply doesn't support these concerns, at least not when using casein in the right dose. In fact, many studies show no significant impact on sleep quality, and in some cases, participants even report improved recovery and less soreness the next day. As for fat gain, protein has a high thermic effect, meaning your body burns calories to digest it, supports lean muscle, and promotes fullness. If anything, it's the least likely macronutrient to contribute to fat accumulation, especially when paired with resistance training. So, what's the simple protocol I typically recommend to patients focused on preserving muscle into their 60s, 70s, and beyond? Consume 30 to 40 grams of casein protein about 30 to 60 minutes before bed. Choose a slow digesting form. Micellar casein is ideal. If using food, low-fat cottage cheese or Greek yogurt are good options, but check the protein content. You often need a large portion. Pair this with adequate total daily protein intake. Ideally, 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, distributed evenly across 3 or even 4 meals. And combine all of this with resistance training at least 2 to 3 times per week to give your muscles that crucial signal to grow and stay. These strategies work perfectly together. Casein alone won't build huge muscles. It mainly protects against overnight loss. But when combined with resistance exercise and proper total protein intake, it closes a critical gap that would otherwise undermine all your efforts. Think of it this way. Each night, you either reinforce your muscle tissue or you allow it to slowly erode. There is no neutral state. Over weeks, months, and years, the consequences of that decision become visibly clear in your posture, your gait, your strength, and your independence. Casein protein before bed is not a trendy hack or a sports nutrition gimmick. It is a smart, clinical tool, one that perfectly aligns with your body's needs, one that fills a critical metabolic gap, one that can help you walk into your 80s and 90s, not with frailty, but with power, control, and autonomy. This is the essence of proactive longevity. Small, intelligent choices that compound over time. Casein protein before bed is one of them. There's a common misconception I hear frequently. The idea that losing muscle as we age is just a cosmetic issue, or that it's normal. People say things like, "I'm just not as strong as I used to be," or "I've lost some muscle, but that's normal, right?" As if the worst outcome is just a softer appearance or less definition in the mirror. My friends, this couldn't be further from the truth. In reality, muscle mass, and even more importantly, muscle function, is among the most powerful predictors we have for your long-term health and how well you'll age. The loss of muscle tissue in aging, that condition known as sarcopenia, is not harmless. It's a clear warning sign of decline, a marker for increasing your risk of falls, fractures, poor blood sugar control, weakened immune system, hospitalizations, and yes, even premature death. Let's look at the data. A 2014 study found that low muscle mass in older adults was independently linked to a higher risk of death from any cause, even after accounting for age, weight, and other health issues. Another study showed that older adults with sarcopenia were significantly more likely to experience problems with daily activities, need long-term care, and have an earlier mortality. And it's not just the amount of muscle, it's your strength and power that matter most. Take grip strength, for example. This simple, low-tech measurement has emerged as one of the strongest independent predictors of mortality across diverse populations. In a huge study of over 140,000 people from 17 countries, lower grip strength was associated with a 17% increased risk of all-cause mortality for every 5-kilogram drop, sometimes even more predictive than blood pressure. Think about that. Your ability to squeeze a hand grip, a simple measure of overall muscle function, tells us more about your risk of death than your blood pressure. That's how incredibly consequential your muscle is. But why does this matter so much? What's the direct link? There are several reasons. First, your muscle is your primary storage for getting rid of blood sugar. It contains the largest number of insulin-sensitive receptors, meaning it's where most of the sugar from your meals goes. Less muscle means poorer blood sugar control, higher insulin levels circulating, and a faster march toward insulin resistance, prediabetes, and type 2 diabetes, all of which accelerate aging at the cellular level. Second, muscle plays a vital role in controlling inflammation and supporting your immune system. Skeletal muscle actually releases myokines, which are like tiny messengers with anti-inflammatory properties, especially when you move. These myokines can calm inflammation, improve your metabolism, and boost your immune health. When muscle mass declines, you lose that protective function. In essence, less muscle means more chronic inflammation, a key driver of nearly every chronic disease we associate with aging. Third, muscle protects your skeletal structure, your bones. Losing muscle means less mechanical load on your bones, leading to decreased bone density. That's one reason sarcopenia and osteoporosis often go hand in hand. And the combination is deadly. A fall that might just bruise a healthy 40-year-old can shatter the hip of a frail 80-year-old. And the one-year mortality after a hip fracture in the elderly exceeds 30%. Not because the fracture itself is always lethal, but because of what it represents. The tipping point into immobility, infection, and metabolic collapse. And fourth, and this is crucial, muscle is a buffer for physiological stress. It's the tissue your body uses when fighting illness, recovering from surgery, or fasting during a hospital stay. If you don't have adequate reserves, your body starts breaking down critical proteins in your organs and immune cells. In cancer patients, this is called cachexia, but the same principles apply more broadly. Muscle mass is a reserve of survivability. The term I use with patients is physiological capital. You want as much of it as possible as you enter your 60s and 70s, because every illness, every hospitalization, every period of bed rest is like a withdrawal from your account. If your account is empty, recovery is severely compromised. If it's robust, you bounce back. This brings us full circle to our earlier point about nighttime muscle breakdown. If you're losing muscle during sleep, a process that speeds up with age, inactivity, and poor nutrition, you're steadily eroding that capital 1 gram at a time. And if you're not doing anything to reverse or blunt that loss, especially in that critical overnight window, you're passively accelerating your decline. Now imagine the opposite scenario. You've made muscle preservation a priority. You lift heavy things a few times a week. You eat sufficient protein distributed evenly throughout the day. You consume a slow-digesting protein like casein before bed to provide amino acids during the long overnight fast. You sleep well, recover well, and remain physically active. That person, even if they're 75 or 80, is far more likely to retain independence, avoid hospitalizations, and maintain cognitive and metabolic function. Not because they're lucky, but because they've stacked the odds in their favor by protecting the most important tissue in aging, skeletal muscle. Let me be blunt, Senior Fit Nation. When I look at an older adult who is frail, hunched, and slow-moving, I don't just see a physical decline. I see metabolic risk, fall risk, immune vulnerability, reduced cellular energy, and a sharply elevated risk of serious health issues in the next 5 to 10 years. Sarcopenia is not just a symptom, it's a profound signal, and we ignore it at our peril. Fortunately, it's also modifiable. Muscle is one of the few tissues you can actually add back with the right inputs, even into your 80s and 90s. But you have to be proactive. You can't wait until you're weak and immobile to start. And you can't rely on vague ideas like eat enough or stay active. The approach has to be precise, because anabolic resistance in aging makes the margin for error smaller. And that's what makes interventions like pre-sleep casein so valuable. It's one of the most targeted tools we have to blunt the muscle-wasting effects of overnight fasting at precisely the time when the aging body is least capable of defending itself. It's not a magic bullet, but it's an important brick in the wall. If you care about being able to get up off the floor unassisted at 85, walk your dog at 90, or simply avoid the cascade of decline that begins with muscle loss, then this kind of intervention isn't optional. It's foundational. This is the difference between lifespan and health span. And ultimately, it's the difference between merely surviving aging and truly thriving through it. Understanding that muscle loss is not just a cosmetic concern, but a metabolic liability and a predictor of mortality, the question naturally becomes, what can we do about it? In my practice, when I work with patients, particularly those over the age of 50, one of the most impactful, yet underappreciated, interventions we use is a structured nighttime protocol designed to stop that overnight muscle loss. The goal isn't simply to slow it down. It's to preserve function, improve your metabolic flexibility, and ultimately extend your healthy, independent years. Let's walk through exactly how that protocol looks. The cornerstone of the protocol is protein timing and quality. Specifically, delivering a slow digesting, leucine-rich protein source just before bed. Why? Because that overnight fast, typically 7 to 9 hours, is a time when muscle protein synthesis, MPS, drops, and muscle protein breakdown, MPB, takes over. This imbalance shifts older adults, who are already prone to anabolic resistance, into a deeper muscle-losing state. You can't fully eliminate muscle breakdown during sleep, but you can blunt it, and in many cases, actually improve the net balance by ensuring a sustained supply of amino acids during this window. That's where micellar casein protein comes in. Micellar casein is the ideal protein for this task for two key reasons. 1. It digests slowly. It forms a gel in your stomach, leading to a gradual release of amino acids into your bloodstream over 6 to 7 hours. 2. It is rich in leucine. This is the amino acid most potent in triggering MPS, your muscle-building switch. What we're trying to create is a metabolic state where muscle building continues, even if at a lower level than after exercise, throughout the night. This counterbalances the inevitable muscle-losing forces of sleep. So here's how I structure the protocol. The pre-sleep protein dose. The optimal dose, according to the science, is 30 to 40 grams of casein protein consumed about 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime. This provides enough amino acids and, crucially, exceeds the leucine threshold necessary to stimulate MPS in older adults. Typically around 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine per serving in this population. It's important to note, many whey-based proteins won't achieve this effect because of their fast absorption. Whey gives a quick spike, which is great after a workout, but it falls off quickly and won't last through a long overnight fast. Source of casein. Ideally, we use micellar casein as a supplement. This is the natural, unhydrolyzed form that digests slowly. Some people prefer whole food alternatives, like cottage cheese or Greek yogurt. And while these are useful, getting a 30 to 40 gram dose of protein from these can require fairly large servings. For example, you may need 400 to 500 grams of low-fat cottage cheese to hit that target. That can be a digestive challenge late at night for many. Therefore, I often recommend a high-quality micellar casein protein supplement. Look for minimal ingredients, low in sugar, and ideally third-party tested. A scoop in water or blended with a small amount of unsweetened almond milk is typically sufficient. Resistance training timing. To truly maximize the effect of pre-sleep casein, it's best paired with resistance training performed earlier in the day. While the anabolic window after exercise is more flexible than once believed, performing resistance exercise within 6 to 8 hours of your evening protein feeding enhances muscle sensitivity to amino acids. If you train in the afternoon or early evening, that casein dose before bed becomes like a second hit, reinforcing your muscles' ability to adapt and grow from your workout. It's a powerful 1-2 punch. Sleep. Hygiene consideration. Some patients worry that eating before bed will interfere with sleep. That can be true, particularly if the meal is large, high in fat, or paired with high-sugar carbohydrates. But casein protein, taken in liquid form or from a modest whole food source, has consistently not been shown to impair sleep quality. In fact, in several studies, pre-sleep protein intake actually improved next-day recovery and reduced muscle soreness. To minimize any potential disruption, keep your pre-sleep feeding small, around 200 to 250 calories. Avoid high-fat accompaniments. Avoid stimulants or sugar within 3 to 4 hours of sleep. And make sure your last training session ends at least 2 hours before bed. Total daily protein matters. 2. This protocol doesn't work in isolation. The pre-sleep casein dose is one piece of a larger strategy that includes your total daily protein intake, consistent resistance training, and overall energy balance. I recommend most older adults aim for 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, distributed evenly across 3 or even 4 meals. Why the even distribution? Because of anabolic resistance, that blunted muscle-building response to protein as we age. By hitting that leucine threshold, around 2.5 grams, multiple times per day, you maximize the number of muscle-building pulses, allowing for better maintenance or even growth of lean muscle. Compliance and sustainability. This protocol works, but only if it's consistent. For that reason, I advise patients to make it as easy as possible. Set a reminder on your phone. Keep a casein shake ready in the fridge. Stack it with your existing evening routine, brushing your teeth, taking your magnesium, or other supplements. The goal is automation. Make it easy to do, hard to forget. And remember, this isn't just a bodybuilding tactic. This is about preventing frailty, improving blood sugar control, boosting your cellular energy, and truly maintaining your independence. Because the reality is, no one cares how jacked you were at 40. What matters is whether you can pick yourself up off the floor, unassisted, at 85. That's the metric that counts. And to that end, the nighttime muscle preservation protocol is one of the most effective, evidence-backed, low-cost tools we have. It's simple, it's aligned with your body's physiology, and when used consistently, it has the potential to preserve your strength, function, and metabolic health well into advanced age. In summary, Senior Fit Nation, consume 30 to 40 grams of micellar casein 30 to 60 minutes before bed. Pair it with resistance training during the day. Maintain a robust total daily protein intake of 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. Ensure your sleep is protected by minimizing meal size and sugar near bedtime. And most importantly, make it consistent. This is a long game. This is how we build incredible resilience into aging, not by waiting for problems to arise, but by targeting the known weak points of our physiology and reinforcing them long before they break. This is medicine practiced at the cutting edge of what's possible, where health span, not just lifespan, is the metric that truly matters. What a journey we've been on today. I hope this deep dive into muscle preservation empowers you to take control of your strength and independence. Remember, your body is an incredible machine, and with the right care, you can truly thrive through every decade. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like, subscribe to Senior Fit Nation, and turn on notifications so you never miss another life-saving health video. Stay strong, stay smart, and keep living your best life.